Welcome to the Thoughtful Leader podcast. My name is Ben Brearley. I'm a leadership coach and the founder of Thoughtful Leader. The Thoughtful Leader podcast is all about short, sharp leadership advice because thoughtful leadership is good leadership. Welcome to episode 278 of the Thoughtful Leader podcast. In this episode, I'm going to talk about overwhelmed teams and how you can help them if you feel like your team is in this situation. Because it's a common challenge that teams get overwhelmed with work and struggle with burnout and stress. So let's look at this challenge right now. Now, stress, burnout, and feeling overwhelmed are common challenges in our workplaces, and these problems have always been there, but thankfully, there does seem to be a greater awareness of them these days. But even with greater awareness, I'm not really seeing these challenges disappear. Managing large workloads and stress levels is a common challenge that isn't going away. So in this episode, I'll be taking a look at some ways that you might be able to help your team members work through the situation. So you might be asking yourself, well, if my team is feeling overwhelmed, is it all my fault as the leader? Well, not necessarily. Yes, leaders have a part to play in work allocation and maintaining oversight so the situation doesn't get out of hand. But often, overwhelming workloads are not completely within the leader's control either. There are a number of factors that can contribute to this problem. The first one is necessary work. Sometimes the work you do is important and it impacts people. Saying no is not always an obvious option, and I find this particularly impacts organisations who provide support for the public, such as in healthcare or social services. The second challenge can be lack of visibility. And you can't be everywhere at once, and sometimes the signs of overwhelm aren't obvious. You may also lead team members who may be scared to admit they're struggling. Overwhelm can also occur because you have a team of what I call people. So you know those people who love helping others? Now they're great until they take on too much work because they're so helpful, and sometimes it's hard to stop our people from doing that. And you might be one of those yourself. Often many thoughtful leaders are. And another challenge can be multiple channels of work. For many teams, the work doesn't come only from the leader. It can come from customers, other teams, senior managers. The list goes on. Sometimes work can pile up from different channels that aren't immediately obvious to you. So no, this isn't all your fault, but we do need to help our people navigate the situation. And there's a related episode, number 197, about stressed team members and looking for these common causes. That's a good one to check out as well. That'll be on the show notes page, thoughtfulleader.com/278. Now, just a note here before we continue on what I call unstructured people. Now, what I've noticed during my travels is that many people aren't structured by nature. They don't log every task they do. And most likely they don't block out their whole day in the calendar to create a detailed schedule. They don't estimate in meticulous detail and watch every minute they spend. So trying to get these types of fluid people to use structured systems is fraught with problems. It might have some benefit initially, but I find it's often not sustainable. So after a while of trying to get people to be someone they're not, the system collapses and they go back to their old ways. So the ideas in this episode are intentionally simple, and that is to hopefully make them easy to implement rather than a constant struggle for people. We don't want people fighting against their nature. We want them to be themselves with some simple tweaks that help them reduce their feelings of overwhelm. So let's look at how to help your team when they're feeling overwhelmed now. And during my time leading teams and coaching leaders who are feeling overwhelmed, I've noticed something. One of the biggest causes of overwhelm comes from feelings of uncertainty. Uncertainty comes in a few different forms, and you can phrase them as questions. So the first one I find is, can this work even be done? Is the work possible in the time I have? How should the work be packaged up to be achievable in my role? And what work is the most important? So we want to help our team reduce uncertainty if we're going to drive down our feelings of overwhelm. And uncertainty is also a big problem when it comes to motivation as well. So it's a real key one to reduce. And the first way I think about this problem the way I phrase it is, I want to help your people find out if they're screwed or not. So let me explain. When I was a consultant earlier in my career, I started to realize that it's very important to know if you're screwed or not. And by screwed, I mean in trouble, unable to hit the deadline or finish the work. Now, what I mean by this is that the uncertainty is a killer. If you feel anxious because you don't know if you can get the job done by the deadline, you're in limbo, anxious and stressed. So you need to clarify the situation by finding out if you're in trouble or not. And if the answer is yes, now you can do something about it. Now, on the other hand, if the answer is, well, I don't really know, you continue on the same path, feeling overwhelmed and anxious, failing to make the changes needed to succeed because you might be okay, but you're not really sure. The problem with this I don't know and this uncertainty is it leads to inaction. Now, we want to provide your team with certainty so they know they need to act or whether they're on the right track. So let's look at how we might do this. And there is a related episode, number 65, How to Deal with Uncertainty, Working in the Grey, as I put it. That's a good one on this topic as well. So check that one out on the show notes page. Now, the first thing we want to do here is we want to find out if it's possible. So we'll start by helping our team members find out if their workload is actually possible in the time available. Now, this can be super simple. Map out the working week, use big blocks like 8-hour days or whatever is a normal day for them. Now, if the overwhelm includes their personal life, use full days instead of just work hours. So next, help them do a ballpark estimate of each piece of work they have on. Sum them all up to create a total. Are there enough hours available to fit the tasks? Now, is it close or is it just way off? Now, this might not be scientific, but it can be a good starting point to work out whether the team member needs to look for alternative options or if they can stay the course to get the work done. Now, the second thing to do is to help your team member categorize their work. So when you're looking at a task list of 20 items, it's hard to tell what's important and what's not. So instead of trying to prioritize on a task level, start by grouping the work of the team member into categories. So categories can help you to abstract the work into more manageable chunks. And once you have the categories, see if you can help your team member work out which categories of work are more important than others. Now, obviously, different pieces of work will have different deadlines, but this is a good starting point for prioritization. Now, if your people aren't clear on which categories are most important, you can guide them and you can set the priority. And this gives them permission to prioritize their own work. Prioritization takes the guesswork out of what work to do next. And when they have the categories prioritized, they can use these to guide the priority of each task that arrives on their plate as well. And there's a related article which I recommend reading as well. If you have too many priorities, what to do when you're asked to do it all? So that's an interesting one as well. That'll be on the show notes page. That was thoughtfulleader.com/278. Now, also on the show notes page, if you are interested in potentially working with me to solve your leadership challenges or maybe work on some of the challenges you've got in terms of speaking up, pushing back with stakeholders or time management, you can book a free consultation with me to talk about what coaching might look like for you. To do that, you can go to the leadership coaching page, which is on that show notes page, thoughtfulleader.com/278. I look forward to hearing from you. Now, the third thing to do is to stop team members feeling overwhelmed by working out the time blocks. Now, every role is different, so we can't think about managing our workload in the same way all the time. In some roles, for example, interruptions are a key part of the job, especially if you're required to answer phone calls or customer inquiries. Now, in others, team members will have long stretches of time where they can work freely without interruption. The important question to ask is, on an average day, what's the average amount of time you can work without being interrupted? Now, this answer is important because it helps you to work out the blocks of working time that a team member has at their disposal. Now, if a team member has a maximum of 30 minutes at a time without interruption on an average day, it's counterproductive to divide their work into 2-hour blocks. Trying to squeeze 2 hours of work into half an hour is difficult, and has the potential to make the task feel overwhelming. And it can also be a big source of procrastination because people just say, well, I don't have enough time for that, so I'll just start doing it tomorrow. Now, if you can help your team member break their work down into appropriate sized chunks, they can grab chunks that will fit into their work blocks and complete them in the time available. The next suggestion I have here for reducing team overwhelm is to help your team members set limits. Now, this is a simple idea that I worked on with a coaching client recently, and this client was very busy and would often forego healthy actions such as exercising to instead spend more time working. Now, my client noticed decision points throughout the day and week where they would make this choice. So I asked, how many times would you need to exercise in a week to feel satisfied about the amount of exercise you'd done? And they worked out an appropriate number. Then each time they were tempted to skip the exercise, they'd see how many times they'd exercised already that week. So they'd use the target number to help them make that decision. Now, this strategy certainly doesn't guarantee success, but it does make the decision-making process much more intentional. So rather than just being on autopilot, you're consciously making a choice. It doesn't necessarily need to relate to exercise. Is there another way you could adapt this simple strategy with your team members? Now, it's not about controlling the work here. It's about helping your team control their work. When team members are feeling overwhelmed, it's tempting to run in and we feel like we want to save the day. We cancel tasks, we push back, or we might even do some of the work ourselves. But the problem with this is it doesn't provide any long-term benefit for your team, and it makes them rely on you like a crutch. They'll always need you to be there to save the day, and you can never go home and eat dinner because you have to be there to support everybody. So instead, could you help them apply some of these simple strategies to become a little bit more self-sufficient? And I'm interested in what you think about this. How do you coach your team when they're feeling overwhelmed? Let me and all the other Thoughtful Leaders know in the comments on the show notes page. That was thoughtfulleader.com/278. Okay, thank you very much for listening. If you haven't already, please leave a positive review on your podcast app of choice. It helps me spread the word of Thoughtful Leader and help some of the thoughtful and potentially more quiet leaders out there who we really need doing well in our workplaces. Okay, thank you once again for listening. I'll be back in the next one.